Well, I don't know why I'm ever surprised. Daniel and I had talked about the layout for this text, and I thought, well, I'll do chapters 3 and 4 together. Because sometimes it's done that way. It is one unit, and we'll read it together as one unit next week. But, of course, the more I went through it, I was like, no, we need to devote one whole week to this text. So essentially what we're going to do is we'll be 3 weeks in the Jordan. Technically 4, because in between those 3 weeks, well, I shouldn't say in the Jordan, chapter 5, we are out of the Jordan. Really, by the end of the text today, they're out of the Jordan, but then they're back in the Jordan, because that's the way the text goes. It kind of recapitulates certain things. But also on the 22nd, we're going to have baptisms, which will remind us again of what was accomplished here, or at least what this speaks ahead to, Christ's work of redemption. And so we got a lot of neat weeks coming up. I was thinking about it, and I was like, we could have done the baptisms on Easter. I mean, what a wonderful message for Easter. And I thought we can call everyone and delay it 2 weeks, and no, we're not going to do that. All it means is we get to hear the gospel again and again and again, which we should always hear, but we are going to hear very clearly why we are celebrating Easter in multiple weeks here. To bring us up to where we were before, if you remember when we looked at chapter 1, and then we took this detour, so to speak, in chapter 2. In chapter 1, God is telling Joshua that he is going to be with them, that it's the same God that was with Moses is going to be with them, that he is going to walk with them, and so to be strong and courageous. And then there was that aside, it seems, where they send spies off into Jericho. And then in chapter 3, where we pick up, it says, then Joshua rose early in the morning. And again, we said before, that would have made sense to have gone from chapter 1 to chapter 2. And I just want to say this just briefly. I don't want to spend a lot of time here. But if you're reading through, and if you've been reading through this and you're counting the days, and in chapter 1 he says, prepare yourself, for in 3 days we will cross the Jordan. And then the spies go off into Jericho, and they're told to hide in the mountain for 3 days. And then they come back here, and then they're told to wait 3 days. We're now at 6 days. 9 days. I can't count. So we're counting, we're adding on all the days. What I believe, and just to kind of help us here, I believe what has happened, and reading all of the commentaries, is that on that very first day, on day 1, God said, this is what's going to happen. And Joshua said, okay, everyone, in 3 days, we're going to be crossing over. He sent the spies off day 1. Day 1, they arrive in Jericho. Day 1, they have all the interactions that they have. Before day 2 starts, they have left Rahab's house and go hide until the 3rd day, which then they come to Joshua. It doesn't say back to Shittim, it says to Joshua. Meanwhile, while they were doing that, immediately Joshua had acted. They go to bed. Joshua wakes up immediately the next morning, and then tells them on this 3rd day, when he says, we're going to move down to the Jordan. They lodge there that night. The next day would be the 3rd day. And that's how that all flows. I know that's very quick. I just want to give that, but if there's questions on that, let me know. But I don't see any contradiction here. I see there's a flow to this. And the reason I think it's important to say all of that, not getting ahead of myself, is that we see that Joshua obeyed immediately. Often we find this with Abraham and with Moses, when God spoke to them, that immediately it says they rose the next morning and proceeded to be obedient to God. And so I think that's what we're supposed to see here. I asked the kids to do that song, All My Boast Is in Jesus, because it fits so well with the text today. In the opening, what wonder of wonders, what love is this? Of all the wonders that God has done, the first and foremost is that he sent Christ, right? That Christ died and took our sins and gave us his righteousness, uniting us with his Son. And so that ultimately is what we're going to see in all of this. But what wonder of wonders. And so that's what we've titled the message for today. And this is what we're going to look at, just so you have an idea. I believe there's 3 sections to this that we're going to look at. And the first is that we see the people preparing for the wonders that God is going to do. When he tells them to consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow I will do wonders among you. And then after that, we're going to look at, though, what is the purpose of the wonders that he does. And then finally, we'll look at the pattern of God's working. And I think all of us could go, yeah, I have some ideas on the pattern of God's working in my life anyways. But let's start though. We'll start with preparing for his wonders. And the first thing, again, I want us to notice is this, and well, actually, to the point that I'm trying to preach, I am not doing with us. This whole first point is about preparing for God's wonders. And as we were praying in the room beforehand, there was these prayers that were said of just help us, prepare our hearts, open our eyes, help us to receive your word. And what we're going to say in this short time of point one is that we need to be prepared to come to God's presence. This is the whole point that he's making here, is preparing them to come to God's presence. And I hope that we're all doing that every Sunday as we come, that we are preparing and saying, God, would you prepare my heart to receive your word today, to fellowship with your people, to see you today. And so let's stop and do that together, to ask together that God would do this right now. Father, such an illustration of where we are at and who we are as humans, where I've gone through this all this week, preached it this morning, looking at your word again, and still here in this moment, I'm forgetting to take a pause for all of us to ask you, God of all the earth, the living God who is among us, because of your Spirit dwelling in us, because of the work that Christ has done, Father, that you would help us to see you clearly. Father, there's so many things on our hearts at all times, things that are heavy, things that are joyful, but things other than you. So, Father, right now I ask that you would help us to consecrate ourselves, and maybe not everyone knows what that word means at this moment, but, Father, to prepare ourselves to come into your presence, to hear your word. Father, would you prepare our hearts, put everything else aside, help us to see you, to see the wonder of this God that we serve, of your faithfulness. Father, please do this work. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. It's funny how that works, isn't it? We write in, this is what we're talking about, and then we forget in that moment. We pop here in chapter 3. Again, Joshua, we're going back to where God had just spoken to Joshua and said, this is what you're going to do. Prepare the people. I am going with you. You are going to cross this Jordan. I am going to give you this land. And of course, in the meantime, all that's happening there in Jericho. But what does Joshua do that very next morning? It says he rose early in the morning. So first, and don't actually write this down, let's say first point of the day, Christians rise early. You have to. No, that is not the point here. I'll clarify that. I like rising early, so it would be very easy for me to say that it's a good biblical thing to do. The point is not that he rose early. The point is that he was obedient and that he had faith, that he woke up and said, I believe your word and I am acting on it. And any of us, whether you're a night owl or an early morning person, when you're excited about something, when you believe something is happening, that next day you can get up, even when it's a time change. You can get up. And so there's obedience here, but not just obedience, right? There seems to be this trust, this faith that God is going to do what he says he's going to do. And I would add one other thing to that, is that there's hope. That there's an expectancy that God is going to do what he's going to do, or what he said he's going to do. So Joshua rises early, and there's this excitement, and this, okay, let's go. And then he talks to the people, and he says, all right, wait. He rushes to have everybody wait. Do you see that here? He says that. He rose early in the morning, and he set out from Shittim, and then they come to the Jordan, and they lodge. And he says, at the end of these 3 days that God has given us, then we'll cross. And isn't that often the case? I mean, just right off the bat, we're learning something or seeing something that's so relatable that God often brings us to a place and we go, okay, yes, God, I can do this. And then another day passes and you're like, I can do it, God, I can do it. And then 3 days and 4, then a week and a month. And you're like, God, I mean, I was able to do it like a month ago. I'm kind of wearing down a little bit now, and it's hard. But God often seems to do this. In fact, one commentator, David Jackman, said there's a 3-day pause, perhaps to allow the impossibility of what is about to happen from a purely human point of view to sink really deeply into their consciousness. And some people might think, that seems kind of mean of God. Why would he do that? Why would he allow that? Why would he bring them to a place and just let that sink deeply, like we don't feel that enough already? But he goes on and he says, seeming delays frequently have the greater purpose of refining and deepening our faith. And they do. When God brings us to these places and he says, I want you to sit and wait, and these people are waiting. They've been told they're going to cross this Jordan, and we're going to talk about this in a bit. But this Jordan River is overflowing its banks, and they know they cannot cross this. And so they sit and they wait, and they go, God has told us that we can do this, but how? How are we to do this? And the instructions that he gives them are also very little, which also we go, yep, that seems like God, right? God says, I want you to go and do this. And it's like, but God, how? What are the details? I want to know how it's going to work, step by step, all the way to the end. Show me how it's going to work. But all he tells them here is, he says, at the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priest, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. And we'll stop there for a second. He gives them some specific instructions. But it's get ready and follow the Ark. And again, you're sitting here looking, and you're looking at this river you cannot pass. And he's saying, go follow the Ark. And you're like, okay, where? Like how? How is this going to work? But he causes them, or he asks them, he says, this is what I want you to do, is I want you to trust me. And so they have some information, but it's very little, and yet all that he gives them is enough. It's to submit to him. As one person said, they're to look to the ark, not to the river. Right? And this is what he gives them. Right now, what I want you to do is follow me. And often we're like, God, I want the details. But he's saying, no, I'm enough. Keep your eyes on me. Follow me. In fact, David Jackman, again, another quote from him, he says this. He says, we must never give up what we do know because of what we don't. And to explain it, he says, even though we don't know how God's faithfulness and power will be revealed or how he will order our circumstances, what we do know is that he is our God, committed to us by his unbreakable covenant promise, and his love is as great as his power and knows neither measure nor end. At this point, this is all God gives them. And if you're looking at the text, he just gives them little bit by little bit. We've seen the whole thing. We've read the whole thing. But they're only getting little bit by little bit. I just want you to follow me. I want you to follow me. Will you do that? But then he gives them some very specific instructions, because then he says, yet there is some specific instructions. I want you to keep 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. And 2,000 cubits is about 3,000 feet, or about half a mile. And he says for them, he says, I want you to do this. Don't come near it, in order that you may know the way that you should go. For you've not passed this way before. And again, there's lots of things we could talk about, like the terrain and what it looked like. This is a large group of people. Right? A couple of million people getting ready to cross, and as they're getting ready to cross, it doesn't seem like the idea here is, I want you to watch where the ark goes because you're all going to follow that same path. Right? That's not the point. So what is this point? Why this distance? Is it because it's the ark and it's holy, or is there something else that he's doing here? And again, that often is the case, where God has given us instruction, like, God, I don't understand your instructions. You've told me to do this, I'll do it, but I don't understand it. But he's going to reveal to them why. And it's going to come, and we're going to let it sit for a second. Because it's very specific. Right? Go down. That's all you need to know is follow me. Keep your eyes on the ark, but stay back from it. And so he tells them that. And he's going to reveal to them. But all they need to know now is that they need to follow him. But then the most important thing he tells to them here is this. He says in verse 5, and Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on before the people. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went before the people. So this first great command that he gives them is to consecrate themselves. And as we prayed, I prayed that we would consecrate ourselves. So what does he mean by that? Consecrate yourself, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Consecration, and we'll see this in Exodus, we're going to look at this, but it is this idea of cleansing, of purifying, of making yourself holy. We talked about this in Ephesians, that we are all sanctified, right? That we are all saints. It's the work that God does, but there's also this part that he asks us to do, to sanctify yourself, to make yourself ready to see the presence of God. But let's look at this together, because in Exodus, when they were with Moses, and we talked about this at GCG, in fact, Caleb had a good point. We were talking about, like, how far back from the mountain should you be? There's a lot of similarities in this story, but Moses is about to go up and receive a word from the Lord, that God is going to speak to him directly and give him the commandments, that then those tablets are now in that Ark of the Covenant. But it says, the Lord said to Moses on that day, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their garments and be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. And you hear a lot of the similarities. He says, I want you to consecrate yourself because on the third day, God is going to come and he's going to reveal himself. I want you to be ready for this. And so I'm not going to read the whole passage. You can look that up later. But he says that they're to consecrate themselves. And so Moses goes and he tells the people, in verse 14, it says he went down and told them consecrate themselves and to wash their garments and to be ready on the third day and not to go near a woman. And so there's this idea that he's telling them, I want you to purify yourself, to make yourself ready. And we could say it maybe two ways here. There's certainly this piece that anything that would be unclean, anything that would separate you from God, anything that would keep you from coming into his presence, put that away. But there's also even a little bit further than he says, not just the things that would separate you from God, but also the things that would distract you from God. There's this idea in sanctifying or consecrating themselves that they are saying, nothing else matters for this time. I'm going to focus on you, God, for this time. In fact, I mentioned this morning, but we're in the season of Lent right now. Lent is for that purpose. It's a multi-purpose, but it is to say, I recognize the sin in my life, and I'm going to put other things aside right now so that I can focus this time on Christ, coming up to the celebration of Easter, of what Christ has done for us. But this is what he's told to do. In fact, again, somebody put it this way, said to consecrate themselves involved washing of garments, as well as an inner concentration and renewed dependency on God. So why? Why was this needed? Well, again, and I have this, I'll put it up in a second, but why was this needed? What's the purpose for this? Dale Davis says this. He says, why all the bother about the distance and the attitude? Why all the fuss over preparation for this big event? Because it is crucial that Israel recognize that what happens is indeed Yahweh's work. And unless they have proper insight, expectancy, and preparation, they could see Yahweh's work and not understand its true value and significance. Right? So God's telling them, I want you to be ready. I want you to see all that I have for you to see. And if you're not ready, you're going to miss it. You might see it and not understand it. And this is true in our lives, that God is always doing a work, and often we're not prepared in our hearts to see what God's doing. In fact, let me read this. Let me say this first. I'm going to do this out of order a little bit, and there's a reason. When I there was a Bible school that I went to, and that school there was a lot of things that were very confusing there, but there was one class that I really enjoyed. Out of all the classes, it was the only one that was not for any credit. It was a side quest, so to speak. Anyway, they just told us, I want you to do this. I want you to take a notebook, and everywhere you go in your life, stores, work, wherever you go, I want you to take this notebook, and I want you to go spy on God. I want you to go look for God working in the world around you. And it was one of the most formative things in my life. It changed the way that I looked at the world, because as you go to the grocery store and you're sitting there with a notebook, which looks odd, by the way, you're just taking notes, card number, anyway. But, you're watching people. You don't have to have your notebook out. But the point was that you are looking. There's a lady in front of you at the register, and she doesn't have money to pay. And she's just looking stressed, and you go, you know what, there's somebody who needs the love of God right now. But I wouldn't have seen her, but I've seen her otherwise. So there's moments when we saw somebody step in and God do a work and bless somebody, and you're able to go, hey, there's God moving. I can recognize that, and I can say that to them. I can help point them to him. But it just changed the fact that my heart was in a different place, that I went and looked, and I was prepared and ready and looking for God to move. And so Dale Davis, again, coming back to what he was saying there, he asked these questions. He says, do you prepare yourself for the practice of the public worship of God? If we come into the public worship of God and we're not impressed with the grandeur of the living God in that place, is it because we have not prepared ourselves to see him as such? Could it be that we even fail to detect the Lord's marvelous working in the routine affairs of our lives simply because we have not prepared ourselves to see or even expect that? Those are great questions. Those were very convicting for me this week. Am I doing that? Am I coming to this place? Right? We come here on Sundays and it's wonderful. This is our church family. God speaks to us. We know that. But are we coming at it just, I don't know. There's a par, like if we're playing golf, this is just par. I'm satisfied with that. I come in, I expect God to say something. Or are we coming in on a Sunday morning and we are praying ahead of time and saying, Holy Spirit, work in me, prepare me. Put aside anything that would distract me. You, God of all the earth, are about to speak through your living word. will you prepare me, help me to be ready to see what you can do? And then not just in this place, but we go everywhere in this world as we walk around and we go, I expect to see God move. He's the God of all the earth. There is nowhere that I walk that God is not moving, that he's not doing something. And am I prepared? Or am I too busy with other things in life and enjoying those things, whether they be sinful or just distracting? And so this is the first thing that he tells them is prepare. Prepare for his wonders. I'm about to do great things, wonders among you. Prepare yourselves to see that. And hopefully I remember to come back to this because that piece of follow at 2,000 cubits, and why. We're going to hopefully see that together here in a minute because, again, all we're told now is prepare. Just follow. Follow what I've told you. Look for my working among you. But the next thing that we want to see is not just the preparing, but we want to see what is the purpose. What is the purpose of God working this wonder? And not just this wonder, but what he does in our lives at all times. The first thing that we see here is that he says to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that you may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant, that when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And we'll pause right there. First thing we find here in the middle of this is he says, Joshua, I'm about to do something. I'm going to exalt you in the eyes of all the people. And we could look at it and go, this is what God's doing. This wonder is to exalt Joshua, to lift him up so we all see Joshua is great. But we'd be misreading this. We'd be missing what he's saying. Because he says, I will exalt you so that they may know that I am with you. Just as I was with Moses, so I am with you. And isn't that the promise that he gave in the very beginning? I'm the same God as I was with him. I will be with you. And so this is what he's saying is I want you to know that I am with you. And there's some neat things here. And again, there's so much that we can look at. And hopefully over the next couple of weeks, we'll draw some of these things out. There's so many neat things that we can look at that happen here. And we go, it's a depiction of what's to come. We're here at the Jordan. God exalts Joshua so that his name, God's name, is lifted high. Many years later, when Jesus is being baptized in the Jordan, in this location, this area, it is him that is exalted, right? Where God speaks as the Father and says, this is my Son in whom I am well pleased. And so there's all these the things that are just looking ahead to Christ as the ultimate hope that we're looking at. But the point here is that God is saying, I am going to be exalted. I am going to show you that I am with you. And so he exalts Joshua, not so that Joshua is exalted for his own glory, but that Joshua is exalted. He is lifted high so that all people see that God is faithful to his promises. He is faithful to his covenant and to his character. I was going to say this earlier, and it's good to say it now. I was jokingly going to ask if anyone knew who the main character was in this chapter, because it's the most repeated name. There's a little hint there. The name, it is a name in this chapter. And does anyone have a guess at what the most repeated name in this chapter is? What's that? In a lot of ways it is, but no, this is why Charlie's like, it's mean to do this. Name. It is the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant. Isn't it interesting? 17 times he is named over these two chapters, 3 and 4. 9 times in this chapter, and then an additional 2 times that he says it, because he talks about when you stay 2,000 cubits away from it. So he references it 21 times over these 2 chapters. There's a focus here. The focus is not the exaltation of Joshua. The focus is the Ark of the Covenant, and there's a drawing of it. But the Ark of the Covenant is the focus. And in fact, for anyone who's maybe not looked at this, there are many depictions, and I was trying to find one. All of them seem a little off. But this is just a rendering of what the Ark of the Covenant would have looked like. And if you've been reading in any of these, chapters that are coming up to Joshua and some of your studying, you're going to read about this, where God gave the instructions for this. But this is the ark, if you're noticing, the ark of what? Of the covenant that he has made with them. What they're to notice is that what is going into the water ahead of them, what are they supposed to be following? It is the ark of the covenant. And it says at one point here in verse 11, I think, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth. He ties himself to this. And he says, I want you to follow this and remember that as you see this happen, that it is me going before you, that I, the one who have covenanted covenanted with you, am going before you. And so we see that the purpose here is that he is pointing our eyes to him. He is saying, I am with you. I, the God of all the earth, am with you. So this is not Joshua. This is not the priests that are doing this work. This is God going before them. It is him that is doing this work. He is the primary actor. But also, let me go back to this picture, because he says to them, God says to Joshua, I'm going to exalt you before all the people. As for you, command the priests to bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. And we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We're going to look at this. But there is a lot of faith that is needed, because he says this is an overflowing bank. I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to look at that when we get to the third section here. But he's asking them to go down to this river. And he says, this is all the information. I'm going to give you a little bit more. I want you to go stand in the edge of that water. And Joshua has them go and says, go down to the rushing water. When you get there, stand in and wait for your next order. I don't know. If it's for you guys, how many of you would step into rushing water, first of all? And if you would, Tyler maybe, Caleb, the ones that I could see maybe doing it, but would you do it holding the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord? There's a lot here. There's this submission that he's asking for. But again, the point here is that they follow him, that they look for him. But this is the purpose that he gets to. He says, as for you, command them to come down. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come here and listen. And I love this. Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. There's some gentleness in that. There is some fatherly love there. This is a shepherd who is saying, will you come and listen? The Lord your God, he has spoken, and I want to share his words with you. This is what he's given us. And he says to them, here is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth. What a wonderful phrase. This title, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth, is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above will stand in one heap. This is what he says, though. He says, here is how you will know that I will do what I've said. I'm about to do a work in front of you, this wonder in front of you, and this wonder that I'm about to do is going to confirm for you that everything else I have told you I will also do. Not just what's in front of you at this moment, but everything that will follow after. And I thought about this, and I thought, if you're those people coming down to this rushing water, and somehow he has promised to bring you across, and he's saying, I'm going to do a wonder here, and this wonder is going to confirm for you that everything else, those 7 nations that are waiting to come against you, this is going to confirm for you that I'm going to take care of them. And those people are thinking, I just want to see this. I don't even understand how we're going to get across to this, the thing in front of us. And I think about that in our lives. This is so relatable that God has promised to do all these works. And it's like, God, I don't even know. Just the one thing in front of me, I don't even know if I can get through that, let alone all the other things that I know are waiting for me on the other side of this moment. But he says to them, not just this moment. What I'm going to do is going to confirm for you that I will be faithful all the way through to the end of what I've promised you. All they have to do is trust. And so they're to follow him. And so this is why I want to come back to this, because in verse 4, when he said, I want you to stay 200 cubits, 3,000 feet, half a mile, keep a distance between you and the ark. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way that you shall go, for you have not passed this way before. There are a couple things I want us to notice. One thing that I would have said earlier, but this is when they come to notice, is they're to stay half a mile back. And let me maybe, some of these pictures, they're different places on the Jordan, but just to help us, I'm going to give you, okay. If they were all to stand right at the edge it's a very choppy picture. If they were to stand on the edge, all backed up against each other, this huge crowd, they wouldn't be able to see what's happening in front. But he says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to keep half a mile back, up on the edges, up on the hill. I want you to be able to see what I'm about to do. And so this obedience, so they said, why God? Why half a mile back? So they can have a view of this wonder that God is going to do before them. But not just that. The other thing that I want us to notice here in this text is that it's not just that they would stand back that far, but that their eyes would be fixed on what is happening. Because remember this, for all the last 40 years in the desert, what have they been following? What is the manifestation of God's presence among them? Does anyone remember? What are they following in the desert that shows them that God is leading them? Yeah, that pillar, cloud, fire by night. First of all, I mean, it's amazing. We're talking about this morning of like, wouldn't that be nice? Like, God, I need to know where to go. And it's just this fire that goes in front of you. And like, oh, okay, good. You know, I know exactly where to go or who to talk to or whatever the case is. But with Moses' leadership, there was a clear indicator that God was with him, that his presence was with them. But when Moses died, that no longer was the way that God led them. And he says, I'm going to lead you in a way that you have not gone before. You have not done this before. And I want you to stay back here so you can witness it. And so they stay back and they look on, and what they see is this they've had the ark, but this is the way that he's to manifest his presence with them now, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth. In other words, the reminder that God has covenanted with them, that he is with them, that he will be with them, and more than that, but we'll get to that, is passing before them, and it is the ark that is to go. And because of the ark, the waters will stand back. And he says, you're about to go a way you've never gone before. This is what I want you. I want you to stay back so you can see what I'm doing. So you can see that it is me. It is the God of all the earth who goes before you into the waters. It is me, the God of all the earth, that will remain there until you all have passed over safely. It was God, not Joshua, not the priest. Yes, the priest carried it, but it was God who would hold back the waters and bring his people through. As we sang that song earlier, look what God has done. And I'm trying to remember the lyrics, but so many times in that song, it was, I will not, what is it? Not boasting, the lyrics to that. Anyway, we all just sang it. But, you know, there's nothing else to boast in. And we can sing, I mean, we're going to see other scriptures, but there is nothing to boast in. It is all God. Ephesians tells us that, right? That he saves us by grace through faith. Why? So that there's nothing to boast in of our own selves. There is nothing that we bring. In fact, as Israel looks back later, in Psalm 114. Here we go. In Psalm 114, as they're looking back, I love this because they say, when Israel went out from Egypt, the house of Jacob, from a people of strange language, Judah became his sanctuary. Israel his dominion. And then listen to these. The sea looked and fled. Right, the Red Sea looked and fled. Jordan turned back. The mountains skipped like rams and hills like lambs. The mountain referencing Sinai, when they went there and it shook with the presence of the Lord. And then in this verse, I love this. What ails you, O sea, that you flee? O Jordan, that you turn back? And I don't know, it's just kind of, what ails you that you flee? Oh, is it this? It's the Lord of all the earth, right? O mountains, that you skip like rams, O hills like lambs. Tremble, O earth, at the presence of the Lord, at the presence of the God of Jacob, who turns rocks into a pool of water and flint into a spring of water. The purpose of all he's doing here is that they see that it is God and only God that can deliver them. He brings them to this moment to see that it is God who is with you, the God of all the earth, the living God is among you, and he is going before you. And so you imagine that these people are sitting up on the edge of the bank, and they're seeing God go before them, and they're seeing the water stop. And we'll get to that in a second. But think about this. They're on the one side of the Jordan looking down at what's happening. Who's on the other side? Right, Jericho, all these others, the Canaanites, are up there and have a view down at the river. And they're also seeing that the God of all the earth is coming. Right, that when the waters hold back, who could do that except the God of all the earth? And so he's the one to come. And of course, this is what Rahab has already confessed. You know, we just talked about that just a day earlier in this narrative. She had just confessed with her mouth that he alone is the God of all the earth. In fact, we'll look back at her confession because what a wonderful statement she says when she says, I know that the Lord has given you the land. It's his, right? He's the Lord of all the earth. It's his to give. He has given you the land. And then she says in verse 11, and as soon as we heard what he had done, the Red Sea with the nations around us, as soon as we heard this, our hearts melted. There was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and the earth beneath. And so God, what is he doing? What is the purpose? Is that everyone sees that he is God and there is no other. There is one God, and Jehovah, Yahweh, is his name. So it says, whatever questions then remain for God's people, whatever fears may still linger about what they're going to find when they get into Canaan, God is revealing that he is God of all the earth, that he is for them. He's alleviating those fears, and he is confirming his faithfulness. That the living God, the God of all the earth, is the one who goes before them, and all they have to do is follow. So the Israelites on this day, and of course we in our lives, have only to fix our eyes on the one who has the power over all that we would face. That's simple. We say that, oh yeah, just fix our eyes on Jesus. It's easy. Until those things happen, then we, like Peter, look at the waves around us, right? But there's this other instance, and I love this phrase, Jehoshaphat, King Jehoshaphat, many years later, when they're in the land, is facing this army, this great horde, as he calls them, coming against them. And he says, we're powerless against them. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you. And that was what he was teaching them at this moment. You are powerless against this. There's too many times in our lives when we don't feel that we're powerless. It's a weird statement, but it's true, right? Where we feel like, I can do this. I don't need anyone else. I don't need God. I can do this. But the purpose of his wonder is that their eyes would be fixed on him, the living God, the Lord of all the earth. And so finally, let's wrap up with this then. This is not just that we would see that we need to prepare for his wonders, or even to recognize that this is his purpose, but it's good to look at the pattern that he has here. So I want to read this because I love the way that he builds this. This is, as the writer here is telling this story, he brings it much how God revealed it to them, just piece by piece, little bit by little bit, and much how God reveals things in our lives. But listen to the buildup of this story. He says, so when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priest, bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark, they were dipped in the brink of the water. And then we interrupt this program to bring you a special weather report, right? And do you guys remember hearing those? You listen to the radio and it's like right in the middle of the program, it just cuts in and you're like, no, it was at the best part. Their toes were on the water. We were going to see what happened. And then he just interrupts it with this. And it's like, why? Why did you do that? That seems so odd to just build that up in that way. In fact, I was just thinking, Jay and I were watching a movie a while back, and it was the only place we could find it, and it was free, but it had commercials, and you would have these just dramatic moments. Emotion is building, your eyes are starting to just kind of tear up, and then it's a commercial right in the middle of it because it's a free one, and they don't think about where to put the commercial. They just stick it at every 10-minute interval or whatever. But there's a reason here, and the reason is this, is he's saying all this, that they're coming down, and their feet are about to touch the brink of the water, and you may be thinking, oh, it looks like that. Kind of like Chuck was saying earlier, oh, it's we've been out there. Dan and Kathy have seen it. I mean, the Jordan is pretty narrow at points and pretty shallow at points. And so we're reading and going, okay, yeah, they're about to cross. Not really a big deal. But he says, no, I want you to know something. As they're about to do this, that the waters were overflowing their banks at that time. I need you to know that because it adds to what God has done. And the pattern that God does, because he seems to bring them in the midst of the worst possible time, the most impossible time to cross. To Chuck's point earlier also, there are so many people that try to minimize what God did that day. And that silly story, which I love, and I just heard somebody say again this morning, about 6 inches of water, and it's like there's a miracle there too. I'll share this quickly just because if any of you are researching this later and going, what happened that time? There are people who said, well, there was earthquakes that happened there in the Jordan, which is true. And actually in 1927, there was an earthquake that dislodged the riverbank of the Jordan and stopped up the Jordan for about 21 hours of time, which would be enough if that happened to let the people pass. And it happened around the time that Jericho's walls fell. And I thought, okay, well, there's a couple of things here. One, maybe that happened. Two, it could have been God that shook everything, whether it's an earthquake or not. He shook everything, which we know happens with Jericho. Maybe that happened, maybe. But let's think about something. These people come to this moment, right? This particular year, this month, this day, this moment, when he says, these priests, when their feet touch the water, you will see my wonders. You will see me working and drawing up this riverbed. His word says, however, that these waters stood in a heap, and that's what I want to hold to. It doesn't tell us how it happened, but it tells us that these waters stood in a heap. And so I think that that's the actual thing, is that God just held back these waters. He certainly, as Lord of all the earth, can do that. In fact, my statement to that is this, that the Lord of all the earth alone has power to move the earth at his will and in his time and for his purpose. So whether it's an earthquake that dropped, and we can talk about that later. We talked about this afternoon, and me and the teens were talking about it. And just think for a moment, 16 miles away, that water stopped. And that water that's continually flowing on the other side of that is building and building and building. A mudslide's not going to hold back that much water for all these people to cross. God is the God that does this. In fact, David Raymer says, where the Lord's ark stands, there the waters must do likewise. And that's the point. This is the Lord, or the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth that is stopping these waters. So again, the pattern, we're talking about this, the pattern of his wonders. Why at this moment? Why did he bring them to this place at this moment? Why not when there was a drought? Right? And the waters were passable. And then we could just say, praise God. The people could recognize, hey, this is God's hand, that he brought us here at this moment when there's a drought. And if you're like me, and we all know human tendency, and we know our own hearts, we rarely give God credit, right, for things like that, especially if we can give it instead to chance or luck or karma, right? So God's doing something different here, and there's a purpose. In fact, Dale Davis says this so well. He says, Yahweh delights to show his might in the face of our utter helplessness, apparently so that we cannot help seeing that we contribute nothing to our deliverance. He references Judges 7:2, which is when Gideon is coming against this army, and God says to him, in fact, I have this here, he says, the people you have with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into your hand. You caught that, right? You have too many people to do this work. I need you to lessen them. Have less people to go against these people, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. So God has this pattern of working where he says, I want you to see, I want to do this in a way that you can't help but see that the deliverance will only come from me. And he goes on to say this, perhaps he brings us into impossible circumstances, situations so bleak and hopeless for the very purpose of impressing upon us that if we make it through, if we endure, if we are not overwhelmed and washed away, it will only be because of his grace and power. And this is the way that God seems to work. Right? And this is, for sake of time, I won't go to these, but you can look up later, Psalm 44, 1-8, where again and again, and so many Psalms like this, that say, those deeds that you performed, it was your hand. It was not ours. It was not by our own sword. It was not by our arm. It was by your right hand and the light of your face. It was you, God, that did this work, not us. And of course, this carries all the way through beyond the writers of the Old Testament. Let's look at the Apostle Paul real quick as we close. He says this, he says, we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, as he's talking to the Corinthians, of the affliction that we experienced in Asia, for we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt that we had received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on the God who raises the dead. He delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will deliver us again. This is the point that God is making to them, and the reason that he works in these ways is he brings us to a place where we see it can only ever be him. Right? And again, if we haven't prepared ourselves to see God working, then we come to these moments and we go, God, why? Why this? Why this stream the way it is right now? Of all days, I'm supposed to go across and look at how overflowing and how rushing this water is. But I haven't prepared my heart to say, oh wait, I serve the Lord of all the earth. And he has made a covenant and he is faithful. And if he's brought me here, it's for a purpose. And it's not to exalt me, but to exalt him. And not for me to trust in my own strength, or for this to be easy and comfortable for me, but for me to see that only God can deliver me. A.W. Pink says this. He says, do not look so much upon painful circumstances and difficult situations as unpleasant trials of faith, which have to be endured, but rather thankfully regard them as a golden occasion for you to prove afresh the sufficiency of him who never fails those who fully trust in him. What he's saying is from the book of James. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials. Why? Because it's in this that our faith is strengthened, that we're reminded that the sufficiency is not from us, but from God. So why? Why this pattern? Well, that's why. The pattern that he works in is so that all we can do is see that it's him. When he works in these ways where we're insufficient in ourselves, there is nothing left in us. There's nothing that we can do to cross that place to get to the other side. And our only hope is in him. Do you recognize the gospel in that? It's clear in this, isn't it? Because the gospel is that very thing, that we come to a place when we recognize that we're in desperate need of deliverance, and we cannot deliver ourselves to the other side of death. Right? There is nothing that I can do that will bring me there. And then we have a choice. We come to that moment where we say it's impossible, I cannot make it on my own, and I run in fear, or I try to find another way, only to realize there is no other way. Or by faith, I trust the God who has provided a way. There's so much to say to this, and I don't have time today, but there is a depiction in the Jordan crossing of Christ, many actually. But the Jordan River is a depiction of death. We come to this impossible barrier. I cannot get across. I cannot get myself to the other side, to eternity, to this land of rest. And the ark is a depiction of Christ, the only one who can fulfill the covenant requirements that exist inside of that ark, but also the only one who perfectly fulfills all of the other requirements, the sacrifices, the blood that is poured on the mercy seat for propitiation for our sins. It is Christ who fulfills all of those things, and it is Christ who goes before us into death. And isn't it interesting? Have you maybe heard this when Terry was reading this earlier? But he says, where do the waters roll back to? They roll back to a place called Adam, or Adam. Right? That Christ comes and he enters in and he rolls back the effects of death all the way back to Adam. Right? All the sin, the guilt that entered at that point, Christ, the new, the true and better Adam, he comes and he enters death and he rolls back all of the consequences all the way back to where they began. And it's through Christ and only through him that we're able to pass through into his perfect rest, into a city that is not prepared by hands. There's a hymn that we're going to sing. We're going to sing a different version of it, but I wanted to put this up there. These lyrics from the original, written in the 1700s by a man named William Williams. And it's, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah." And he says, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me by thy powerful hand." This is the depiction of them coming in the desert and trusting God. And he says, "Open now the crystal fountain whence the healing stream doth flow. Let the fire and cloudy pillar lead me all my journey through. Strong deliverer, be thou my strength and shield." And then he ends, and I didn't put all the lyrics up there, but he ends with this: "When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside. Death of death and hell's destruction, land me safe on Canaan's side. Songs of praises, I will ever give to thee. I will ever give to thee." Do you notice? I love this. I was telling Terry beforehand, one of my favorite ways of referring to God. This writer recognized this crossing of the Jordan wasn't just the Ark of the Covenant of all the earth, but this was the one who was going to be the death of death, the one who would become hell's destruction. Christ who goes before us. So when we tread the verge of Jordan, he does bid our anxious fears subside, because Christ, the death of death and hell's destruction, has landed us on Canaan's side. Dale Davis goes on and he says this. He says, "The rescue at the Red Sea, the crossing of the Jordan, and the death and resurrection of Christ are explosions of God's power that are meant to color the whole horizon of the believer's life, in order to assure us that the God who so mightily handles great emergencies is surely adequate for the smaller crises and anxieties that beset us." And that's why I titled this, Wonder of Wonders. What is the wonder of wonders? That Christ has died for us. There's a way provided. And if we are to make it across the final Jordan, It will only be because of Christ, because he has crossed before us. And because he's done that, it should alleviate the fear of any enemy that would ever face us. The greatest wonder that God has done is in Christ. And it's in that, and I don't think I have this up here, but I have this in my mind. That in 1 Corinthians 15, he ends and says, "O death, where is your victory?" You can see the Jordan depicting this. Death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So as we think about this again, when we come to these places, my prayer is that these overflowing Jordans, right, these things that happen in our lives when God does these things and he brings us to these places, that we will see and we'll go, wait, I know the purpose here. I know that this is so that I see God. So my dependency is on him because he is the only one who will bring me through. But that happens as we do this first one, that we are preparing our hearts. God, help me to see, help me to be ready, help me to expect, just like Joshua, that I wake up every morning with an obedient, hopeful expectancy of what you're going to do. Because you've already done it before, because you did it in Christ, because you did it then, I know that you will deliver me now. He who gave his son for us, how will he not also give us all things? If he's already done that, what would he hold back from us? There's a passage in Isaiah 43, and I always am trying to be careful not to misappropriate. But to the extent that this does apply to us, I want to read this to you right now. He says, "But now thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel. Fear not, for I have redeemed you, I have called you by my name. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you." Promises not to run out into a flame and not be burned literally, but that he has redeemed us. What could come against us? The God who has done that has redeemed you, and nothing else can come against you. Before I pray, to stick with what we've talked about, will you take a moment and just write down something that God has spoken to you through this text, something that has impacted you, something that has challenged you, encouraged you, convicted you, or something that has confused you, but just write something down that God has spoken to you. Just take a minute now, write something down. And again, my hope is that you'll internalize what God has spoken, right? That you'll take it with you, that you'll remember that, but also that you'll find somebody this week to share that with. And just say, man, we were with God on Sunday. We heard from him, and this is what we heard. It's amazing. And that you would share that with somebody else. Did you take a minute? Just write that down, and then we'll pray.